Welcome to One Move at a Time, the U.S. Chess Podcast, where we highlight individuals and organizations advancing our mission to empower people, enrich lives, and enhance communities through chess. So, I am Brian Tillis on behalf of U.S. Chess, and this is the One Move at a Time podcast, and we have a special guest with us here today, Kevin James Doyle. So, Kevin, what got you started in chess?
Well, I've been playing chess for over 30 years. My dad taught me when I was a kid. And then what got me into teaching chess, which I've been doing for the past 12 years, was a friend of mine just told me, I'm a comedian and actor, and we're always looking for gigs that are flexible and that we can excel at as kind of performers. And he's like, I've been teaching chess around New York City, and I was between jobs, so I picked up a few lessons for him, and a bunch of parents just started passing my number around, and 12 years later, I've taught over 6,000 lessons. So it was a combination of a love of the game, and I already had a lot of, I had already played it and been pretty good at it for years. And then I found out there was a market to get paid to teach and make my schedule, and it kind of aligned in a perfect way back in 2013. I've been teaching ever since.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about after Endgame, your special.
So after Endgame is a show that is a chess lesson that morphs into kind of a life lesson through storytelling. So I've been doing stand-up and storytelling in New York City for the past 15 years, and some of my big comedic influences would be comedians like Mike Birbiglia. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he does stand-up and jokes, but he usually has a kind of a thread of a story through his show. And I was flown to Singapore last year to teach some very wealthy individuals, millionaires and billionaires, and I was there for 8 weeks, and it just turned into kind of a jaw-dropping, crazy story. And there was a lot of parallels between what I've been teaching my students for years in chess. And so I just started, when I got back from Singapore, I just started getting all these ideas of how a chess lesson could be kind of a perfect platter to tell this story. And then I just started working on it and taking all the crazy stories throughout chess history that I could think about, between Deep Blue and some Bobby Fischer games and some Paul Morphy games and the Turk, the Automaton, probably that a lot of people that listen to this podcast probably know about. But you tell some of these stories to someone that doesn't know about chess, and they're like, "This is amazing." So I tied that in with my experience in Singapore and put together a show about it that is funny and dramatic and pretty, hopefully is pretty palatable to a beginner, and also entertaining for. I've had a few grandmasters come, and they've been complimentary as well. So
That is awesome. So probably the most recent cultural revolution in chess when coming to media was the Queen's Gambit on Netflix.
Yeah.
What did you think about that?
I thought they knocked it out of the park. I think that I think that they. I'm trying to think of how to say it. I think what happened so far is that it was the best, most entertaining entry level story of chess. And what I hope is that instead of it being the last thing, and I feel like I'm part of this, I would like there to be a follow-up. Doesn't need to be Queen's Gambit second season, but a follow-up where there's some chess media that can go even a little bit deeper. Because I think towards the last few episodes, and I've experienced this with my show, like, I really want to go deep into some stuff, and then you just see the audience's eyes glaze over, and you're just like, oh yeah, okay, this is not gonna go too deep. But I just thought it was an incredible representation of the chess world and of that era. And actually, in I just ordered the book on Amazon because it's based on a book, and I've been wanting to see the differences between the book and the TV show. But it truly was life changing for me because I was teaching probably 12 to 15 lessons a week, and once the Queen's Gambit came out, it was the first time I had adults reaching out to me that wanted to teach, learn. So I started teaching 25 to 30 lessons a week. So Queen's Gambit, 5 out of 5 when it comes to my bank account.
I get it. I was a full-time classroom teacher teaching chess at the time, and I had worked with colleagues for 5+ years, and I had never been bombarded with so many questions about chess culture and such interest. So it was great on multiple levels, and as a chess player, knowing that Kasparov was one of the consultants as well as Bruce Pandolfini, they were getting the chess right and building drama as well as just telling a great story from the original text.
On the exact other side, and I'm sure you relate to this, it's so frustrating when you see a commercial or something in a chess show and there's the dark square on the right side or the bishops and the knight. And I'm like, in the Drake J. Cole music video, it's hilarious. Like, just if you look at the chess position and it's just Drake like looking over like with chess, and I'm like, dude, any person that knows anything about chess knows this position makes no sense. And if it did make sense, you're the worst player of all time. And all you need is just very, very basic stuff. So for them to go to such great lengths to synthesize chess in a entertaining, palatable way and have it all be legit was really exciting.
So a lot of viewers are probably thinking chess and comedy might seem like an unlikely pairing. So how do you make that work?
Well, I wouldn't be able to do it if I hadn't been teaching chess for so long, of just knowing what it's like on a student's face to understand something. And there's this word that is usually, when it's attributed to a show or a play, it's a bad thing, which is didactic. If a play or if a movie is too didactic, that's usually not good. And so this was wading into some difficult waters, because I'm literally doing a show that has to be didactic, which is like you're teaching the audience rather than entertaining them. And so it's been a real balance. The thing about chess, which I knew was going to work, is that once you can explain something and articulate it in a good way, people have that the fear that they're not going to understand something, and then they do. And then I can be self-deprecating, and there's so many funny things in chess. There's tension in chess, and so you can automatically use that kind of to your advantage. I know Jordan Peele, from Key and Peele and the film director, he talks about how comedy and horror are very, very closely related, because you kind of are involuntarily scared, and when you are like, oh, and you're involuntarily laughing. So I never saw a connection between horror and comedy until he articulated that. And with this, I think I've been able to use the fear that people have of chess, especially the beginners that come to the show, the fear that they have. It's kind of helped me be locked and loaded to teach them and have them be relieved, and then use kind of their nerves to bring out humor, because they're ready to just be like, when you go to a comedy club, sometimes people are just like, all right, make me laugh, let's see. And with this, people are more scared. They're like, is this going to be funny? So the first time I get a laugh, people relax, and then I kind of have them right there with me. So, and then also, I've heard a great quote about comedy, that if they're not laughing, they should be leaning forward and paying attention. And the second you, just like in Queen's Gambit, when you can tell a story about some of the great games, like the game of the century with Bobby Fischer and Daniel Byrne, when you can articulate that in the Queen Sacrifice, that move and not just go into all the details, but just be able to pick out those few important moments, or talk about, Napoleon Bonaparte playing the automaton. People are like, "Whoa, this is real? This really happened?" And so, one of the tricks that I've pulled is just taking some of the great stories of history and getting to get on stage and tell them. And those are kind of just wild cards that I have up my sleeve to be like, this is already entertaining. I just have to say it to the audience.
It comes to mind in teaching a critical thinking course. I added in a week of just telling stories about rivalries. I used a lot from Kasparov's My Great Predecessors, and I thought this would be something that a bunch of middle schoolers would be bored with. But showing some of the games, and say with the Karpov-Korchnoi World Championship match, with all of the political tension around that match, the sunglasses, there was some hypnosis going on in some of the games. Going through that, they were so entertained by it. Do you have anything on great rivalries in the show?
Yeah, the great rivalry, that I have in this show is actually the story that I have in the second half of the show when I talk about going to Singapore. And it was kind of a relation. That's kind of when I knew the show would work, because there was a guy who flew me down to Singapore to teach all of these wealthy Singaporeans, and Singapore is the exact other side of New York, of the world, so it's literally 12 hours difference. And this guy, my name is Kevin, and this guy's name was Kevin as well. And it started off friendly, and then it really turned into kind of a dark and a bit of a twisted story. And so I thought of, right when that, I was like, oh, I was in a human chess match with this person who brought me out to teach chess. It was like from on high, as someone who is always, as a comedian, storyteller, you're like, man, I'm trying to look for something interesting to talk about. And then I was just like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, does God exist? And I'm like, this was a sign that God exists. It's like, here is this story right here. It was like passed down. So the great rivalry that I thought was, with Kasparov, Karpov, with Fischer, Spassky, with these great moments, I was like, oh man, I get to set up using all of these, because I don't talk about those rivalries in the show, because instead of those, I get to tell my own. And so, so the one that I get into the most is the Fischer Daniel Byrne game. But it was definitely from watching Bobby Fischer versus the World, and then Kasparov versus the Machine. Those two documentaries were hugely informative of like, oh, I've seen this documentary lay the groundwork and then set up this giant chess match. And I was like, now you get to do this through storytelling with this story that you lived through with this person that, like I said, was like light and dark, opposite side of the world, same name. I was just like, oh, thank you.
So, more into chess content, do you have a favorite chess opening? And do you feel that openings say anything about your personality or approach to life, problem solving, the game itself?
Yeah, I think I actually do think that, because one of the first pieces of advice, when you sit down to beginners that don't know anything about chess, you'll see them, move the knight out to the outside, and you're just like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, or go like, pawn to F3 or F4, and it's just like, oh, you don't know what you're doing, And when I first started playing, and I was in middle school, you have this joy of you're playing the game, and then when someone showed me the Spanish opening, Roy Lopez, I was like, and I was like, okay, why is this good? They're like, you control the center, you're fighting over the center, you have some pressure on the king, you're ready to castle. All this stuff, I was like, oh. And from then on, I've used the London system sometimes, but for the most part, and then how it has to do with my personality, I'm like, man, once I got that good fastball, the Spanish opening, just rely on the fastball. Just like go with what works every time, and anytime I experiment out, I've had varying degrees of success. And I don't know, it's just like that classic one that it's not too creative, it's not breaking the rules, but I don't usually play anybody that I need to really break the rules with. And so, and as far as how that relates in my life, I love to travel, I love to tour, I love to have, I'm a comedian, so I don't have a very stable life, but in order to live that unstable life financially and through work and different things, like I'm very regimented, and I've lived in the same neighborhood for 16 years, and I've lived in New York for 16 years, and I have this like home base that allows me to travel and to kind of live a unconventional life. But when it comes to my base, like I'm very regimented and do the same things so that I can be more creative in these other things. So I always feel with the Roy Lopez, I'm like, you know what? If I get a good foundation, then I can get creative later in the game, but I don't want to make any mistake early or go too outside the bounds early. If I lay a good foundation, that'll set me up later, and I feel like I do that a lot in life.
So what's one of the most common mistakes you've had in your students' games?
The hands down, besides rushing, the most common mistake is just when they make a sacrifice or lose a piece and say like, oh, I don't care about it, like I got a bigger plan. And I like letting them have creativity to make these mistakes, but the amount of times that you see just like losing some pieces early and just being like, no, don't worry, like it's part of my plan, and then to watch that sort of crumble underneath, and then you pay for it later. I've tried to explain to my students, if you don't care about that one pawn early on, you lose that one pawn, the rest of the time you just go all the way down if it comes down to that one pawn. Like, and so I think as I learned from that lesson, because there's so many times in chess and in other things that you don't pay for stuff until later. Later in the game, you're just like, oh yeah, I didn't care about that bishop or that knight, and now I don't have enough material to really do any damage. But with young students especially, just not totally understanding that those sacrifices you make early in the game, like once the bank account gets low, once you only have a few pieces left, you're going to have to work a lot harder to take them a lot farther. And that can be the same with the time as well. If I play with the clock, I just tell them, I'm like, don't stress about the clock, but just be aware of it. And and then it's later when 9 minutes. When you're at 9 minutes, you're thinking all the time. When there's 1 minute left, it's the kids will be like, "Can I have more time?" And I'm like, "You absolutely can have more time, but just remember 7 minutes ago when I was saying this is the moment where you're paying for it." So, those are like, and those are fun lessons because they're so applicable, and you can also have some grace and some wiggle room to tell your student it's not just like, well, that's what you get. It's just like, hey, this is a perfect time when we play again. You're going to pay more attention to this early in the game and say, hey, do you want to just keep on trading these pieces that are not worth as much just because you have this plan? Because remember, that might not go the way you think it goes. So those are always fun for me because they're very, very teachable moments.
And in the vein of time, when you're playing games, what's your favorite time control?
My favorite time control is 5 minutes. I think that when I'm playing across the board, I would say 15 and 15. But I think with 5 minutes, I think is pretty great for the internet. I find that I'd rather play more games. There's not that emotional element when I'm playing online as much when I'm sitting across from someone. Um, but I would say 5 minutes. I did get in a really bad habit. This is not good. Do not do this. I got in a really bad Lee chess habit. During the pandemic, there would be these like 15-second tournaments, and it'd be, 15 seconds, 15 seconds. And I had my iPad, so it wouldn't work if I was on my laptop, but on my iPad, and I would just like, boom, boom, boom. And I would just play 30-minute tournaments with 15-second games, and I was just like, I don't know. This feels like the chess equivalent of TikTok. It's just melting my brain, making me stupider.
I get it. I will.
Yeah.
I still play too much bullet chess, and does very, very little for you. I'd say it's got diminishing returns after that first 1,000 games.
Yeah, exactly.
So you describe after Endgame as both a chess lesson and a life lesson. What would you say is the biggest takeaway?
I'd say the biggest takeaway is similar. It goes along with I think Queen's Gambit and a lot of the great sports movies or chess movies that are like more about intellect. But what I found is that a lot of chess metaphors in Queen's Gambit and Wu-Tang songs and in movies or just anything, a lot of times the metaphor is this positive metaphor that is like you're the one that is thinking two steps ahead, or if you really use all of your intellect, you can win in this game. And my story is not that. I don't want to tell the audience how we get there, but my story is a lot more about losing and kind of being in a game that you were up against something way bigger than you expected it to be. And so the takeaway is, and I say this isn't a spoiler, I say this at the end of the show though, is that when I kind of come back and start teaching again, I'm teaching a young student, and I'm just like, a lot of times you learn more about what's important in life when you lose than when you win. And I think that's the lesson of the show, but that's the lesson that I learned through this experience was, a lot of times when you win, you go straight to celebrating. If it's just a strict, I don't think I've ever analyzed a game that I've won. You get that feeling, and then you're just like, yes, you don't go into Lee chess and then click back and look. It's when you lose that you go back and you're like, oh, okay. And so through a storytelling, through the framing of storytelling, that is the entire point of the show. And that's also what I say. It's called After Endgame, partially because there's so many things out there called Endgame already. There's, the movie, but there's also a Taylor Swift song, and there's a Samuel Beckett play, and there's a few books, and there's a TV show. And this show is about the analysis after the end game. It's what you do after the game is over, and what you can learn from the game you played.
Love it. So if you could play, time not being a factor, with any chess player ever in the history of the game, who would you choose and why?
Well, I think I would go back in time and play Paul Morphy in Paris. The reason is I spent some time. I made the first time ever. I'm typically a pretty broke person, and then when I started teaching a lot of chess during the pandemic, I didn't have to commute anymore, so I could teach on Zoom. So there was a small window of time where I paid off a credit card and I had some money in savings, and I took a trip to Paris and fell in love with the city. It was amazing to get to live there for a little bit of time. And then when I was doing research for the show, and I heard about when Paul Morphy went over there and would do these exhibitions where he was just playing chess blindfolded, 8 people at a time, and just this American chess celebrity over in Paris wowing people was pretty amazing to read about. And so there was a picture of him in the magazine Le Monde, and it's the most famous portrait of him. And then there's a picture of him doing one of his chess exhibitions at, I believe it's called the Café Les Régents, and I didn't even know there was that many Paris chess connections. And so, I don't know, that's my favorite part of the show, that I'm doing research, and I was like, man, I was in Paris because of chess, because of money I made with chess, and I walked past that cafe where that was at, so I ended up getting on eBay, and I got the magazine portrait from the 1800s. It was, and so I have it hanging up in the theater in our show, this picture of Paul Morphy. And the other reason why I'm connected to it is now when we play a game, we have all of the chess notation right to the side. But I just think it's so cool how you're literally inside someone's brain from 1854, and if somebody hadn't written the chess notation down, it would just be out in the ether. We wouldn't know about it. But because people took the time to notate these games, we can literally go back in time to a moment that someone was actually thinking about, like, what do I do here? And so I just find that the chess history aspect of it, and between New York and Paris and now Iceland and New Orleans, all these different places are really exciting. But the Paul Morphy in Paris, that kind of holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah, I completely understand. And as we get to the next phase of our interview, let's dive into one of those Morphy games, and that you selected for us against the Duke and the Count.
Yeah.
And
2-on-1.
I mean, Morphy really shows absolute perfection in this game, and it's something you can only strive for, to have a legendary game like this. So, as Fisher said, he started off best by test. And direct play, hitting squares in the center, making a threat to the e-pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And the older version of the Philidor, the modern approach these days to get to the Philidor, is coming from the Knight F6 move order. They're happy to go to the end game. But back, is this 1858?
Yeah.
Not so much with the opening theory.
Yeah. Laying the groundwork for later.
But it's got to be said, the cleanliness of this game. I mean, most of the games in the time period, you see a lot of King's Gambits, and I think it was considered an insult not to accept the King's Gambit in the time period.
Less people were less ruthless back then. They were very like, yes, you. Yeah, now it'd be like, hey, it's fine. Yeah, I like this. I would probably on this next move. Oh, he does take it. Yeah, I would take the. I was gonna guess what he did, and I would definitely take the pawn. So I'm at Morphy's level.
And it's definitely a point of view in the position that when we're analyzing in general, it is always looking at the most forcing move first. And when I'm working with my students, especially beginners, we talk about the concept that chess and boxing have a lot of overlap. and you cannot win with just defense. So this concept is definitely seen here, and black has moved a bishop before the knight, and we're happy in the open position to see a bishop trade for a knight, so liquidating that pawn in the center, and as black decides to capture this knight, the queen jumps into the game very aggressively, eyeing the weakest point in the initial camp because only the king defends it on f7.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on the offensive, defensive. That's another thing with my students, the ones that are more conservative in their play. There's a moment where you kind of just have to step out, and it's interesting when you can see the nerves of that with younger students. Because I'm more of a go for it on fourth down every time when I play Madden. and that gets me in trouble with chess, and I play a lot of backgammon. With backgammon, it can get me in trouble because you can really pay for some mistakes there. But I love how aggressive Morphy is in this game right off the bat.
And with this little bit of extra time with the queen move, this is pretty much going to define the rest of the game. Where if you continually ask, what is the most aggressive move I can play, black just never seems to be able to equalize. And that most aggressive move here with development, bishop c4, hitting the weak f7 pawn.
Yeah.
So now black must react to it. Knight f6, blocking that threat. And we can continue to add pressure here. So some of my students would say, okay, yeah, bishop g5, I'm going to get the bishop out pin, but that's going to give black time to break the pin and get castled and get safe. But Morphy sees the opportunity here to continue pressure, and queen b3. Oof. Making a threat on f7 as well as on b7.
Yeah, I definitely would have. I would have done the queen pressure on the knight. I wouldn't have seen that.
Yeah, and I'm not traditionally an e4 player, so this type of idea that's that deeply ingrained. Never bring your queen out early, and don't move the same piece over and over. But if you have a concrete reason for doing so, I think that statement's incomplete. Never bring the queen out early if she's going to be attacked. You don't want to waste time moving the same piece over and over. But in this case, there's a concrete reason, and black really doesn't have a good way to defend the threat on f7. And we see the awkward defense of queen e7, which we know this queen is definitely going to need to move again in order to get the bishop moved to eventually get castled. So
yeah, I would.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because I'm looking at the notation, so I see what's coming up. But I would. So he gets the knight out. I don't see why you wouldn't go here.
So it is a good question. If we go ahead and play queen takes b7, black is able to force the trade of queens. And white definitely has a much better position, if not already winning. But I feel like Morphy was enjoying himself too much here, just with the overpowering position. So why even allow the opponent to do this?
Yeah.
And we take away that option with development. Knight c3, we cover the e-pawn, and I mean, a knight, when it's at its best, it's touching 8 squares. It's an octopus looking to lunge forward on the attack, and black reacts, says, all right, c6, I'm going to cover the b7 pawn, I'm going to take away the forward squares of the knight. What can you do here? And already Fisher gives annotations here that after Morphy's next move, this is almost a zugzwang position.
Mm.
Bishop g5. And it's simple development. We're pinning the knight, but how can black get out of the bind at all here? If you're a pause your video type of person, if you're playing the home game here, what would you do with black and why? Or in our guest case, what move would you play here?
I mean, I guess right here I would get my knight out. Not my not the knight on
b8?
On b8. I think I would get that knight out to d7. And get them in the mix.
Yeah, I'm seeing drawbacks all over the place in almost every move I'm considering. Knight d7, then I'm probably taking the b pawn. If queen b4, I'm going to go ahead and do the in-between move with check, and the attack's going to continue. Likely the king goes to d8, I can castle with check. That looks devastating.
Yeah.
Even something like h6, that's one of the best of the bad options. But at least Morphy's opponents in this game were thinking, hey, we need to be aggressive. We got to try to push him back. There's just this great piece harmony with the battery of the queen and bishop. So we're going to go b5.
Yeah.
And our natural reaction, I think, most of the time as chess players is, okay, I'm attacked. I trust my opponent's judgment. I'm going to retreat now. But that breaks away from when we're studying tactical combinations. We have this materialistic nature when we're beginning as chess players, but the more tactics you study, the more you see the brilliant queen sacrifices in order to get checkmate. And you learn that material is not everything. And Morphy going along with the theme of the game of I need to be aggressive as possible at all times. Do I have an aggressive option to meet b5? He plays the wonderful sacrifice. Knight takes b5.
Yeah, so good.
And the pain is about to begin here. As taking with check, we're leaving black very few options, and you have that classical question that pops up in most interviews: how many moves can you see ahead? The answer is always it depends. And in this type of position, I'm betting that Morphy could pretty much see the end of the game.
I love how he has the queenside castle right there, because it's like you're worrying about so much. He already has so much pressure, and then just like out of nowhere, it's got now it's just like everything is aligning against that. That we got the pressure with the bishop on the knight. Now we have, I don't know. That's just a beautiful queenside castle. I've had that get me into some real trouble before with people.
And here again, black is left with a box move. We're threatening to take, undermining the defense of d7, and everything's going to fall apart. So rook d8, trying to bolster the defense, but another brilliant move by Morphy here. We've got one piece not doing anything. Let's get him involved. First we sacrifice and slide that remaining piece on over.
Little pin.
Black begs for a queen trade to be able to make it to an endgame, but we are not in the trading business here. Or are we? Forcing moves. Bishop takes. And how to finish things off?
Well, we got the queen with the Oh man. Oh my gosh. That's so good. The queen sacrifice.
So you give up the queen, leaving only the option to take, giving clearance for the rook, and that's it for this one, going down in history as an absolutely legendary game.
The Duke and the Count. I just wish I could be there watching the Duke and the Count after that.
When I've read accounts about the game, Morphy's just watching the play, relaxing, not really thinking, and he was known to be so quick. So he's probably just banging out moves.
Yeah.
Just this was another day at the office for him.
Yeah. I love I love especially with my young students. They get so addicted to the Queen, and they get so obsessed. And it's fun to go through these moments. This is such I've used the end of this game many times to just show in a very clear way. There's no resigning or anything. It has an actual checkmate at the end, and I love showing that queen sacrifice at the end, and then to see how they use the bishop and the rook, and it's a really fun, teachable moment to just be like, I know you love the queen, I know you love the power, I know it's awesome, but this rook and this bishop working together is going to beat them. And then also, I'll stack up, add up all of the points at the end, and be like, less points, got the checkmate, And so this is a very, I have kids as young as 5 or 6. I've gone through the end of this game, and they're just like, wow, that's really cool. So it's a fun gift that we have all the way back in the 1800s that kids are still learning from this.
So, closing out the interview, do you have any other upcoming projects you'd like to share with us, or anything for that matter?
Well, I have. This is fully everything on my mind, and I'm working on until March 8th. And so, if you're in New York City, come to the Soho Playhouse and come see After Endgame. It's a beautiful, small little theater, and we've actually created a chess museum inside. We have history about Paul Morphy, about Deep Blue, about Bobby Fischer's career, and art, chess in the media, chess in the arts. We have information on Vladimir Nabokov has a book, who wrote Lolita. He also wrote a book about chess that's one of his masterpieces. So we talk about Wu-Tang. We have Chess the Musical. We have all these different chess in the media and throughout culture at the theater. And people will be playing chess after. But if you can't make it to New York City, I have a new special out called Diary of a Bald Kid. That is, I read from my journals from when I was a kid, and then I have another special that just came out called Foolproof, and it is another comedy special with some dramatic elements about a wild story, and they're both on Amazon Prime. And so if you'd go check out Foolproof or check out Diary of a Bald Kid, I'm in your living room. You don't have to travel anywhere. You just got to click and rent or buy either of those specials, and I'd love for you to see them.
Well, I can speak for myself that it's definitely going to be on my to-do list now. I sincerely appreciate you coming on to the show and being a guest today. And until next time, this was One Move at a Time.